Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of the Leadership Excellence. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we look at the dangers of climbing Success Mountain, knowing when to continue climbing, when to change direction, or just stop, and the cost of doing any or all of the above. I'm your host. My name is Dov Barron. I'm the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. I'm one of Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers to hire, executive mentor, Entrepreneur magazine contributor, and international business speaker. If you're a new listener, a new viewer, strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. And if you're a regular, I want to say a big thank you to you for helping us to stay at the top as a number one podcast for Fortune 500 and keeping us consistently at the top in a whole bunch of other categories, including next generation leadership, family business, HR, a whole bunch of categories. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody that you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Watching and listening to this show, you're either a high-level executive, an entrepreneur, or a leader in some capacity. And as leaders in any forms, we are all scaling to new heights of success and achievement. But how do you assess whether you're even climbing the right mountain? Because I meet leaders all the time who are on this path. They're climbing this success ladder for themselves, this success mountain for themselves, and there's this moment where they stop and they're not even sure that they're even on the right path. Well, my guest today on this episode is Cathy O'Dowd. She is the author of an outstanding book called Just for the Love of It. Cathy is a South African mountaineer. She was the first woman to climb Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. She has done it from both sides, from the north and the south. One is harder than the other. And she remains an active adventurer to this day. She was part of a team that did the first ascent of Nan-ga, hopefully I got that right, Par-bat via the Mazeno Ridge. Is that right? Mazeno Ridge? Maybe. Probably not. Making a complete balls of it. It's entirely possible, but I'm sure that Cathy will correct us later. Her most recent expectation was a ski-mountaineering ascent of Mount Logan, the second highest peak in North America. Mountain climbing is an excellent metaphor for life, but it's especially a powerful metaphor for those of us in leadership roles. The insights that she has discovered about herself, about individuals, about teams, under intense stress in the face of overwhelming challenge are what Cathy shares with her corporate audiences around the world. Her stories touch on themes of importance to everyone trying to do their best and get their best from their people. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Cathy O'Dowd. Woo! The crowd goes wild. Welcome, Cathy, and forgive my ballsing up.
That's quite the welcome.
It's good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. Go on.
No, it's great to be here, to have a chance to talk about the things about climbing mountains that people miss. It's not all just hell for leather to the summit.
No, I'm sure it's not, and this will be really important. So right now, we're speaking to you. You're in Germany right now, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, Chamonix. Chamonix is the most important mountain town in Europe. It's in France, and it's at the foot of Mont Blanc, the highest mountain in Western Europe.
The foot of Mont Blanc. I remember when I lived in Europe that was kind of it was a glamorous place. There was always these fabulous photographs of Mont Blanc, and of course there's a whole brand based around it, which is pretty cool. I said I think that mountaineering is a great metaphor, and you and I had spoken previously about the fact that I used to do a spot of that, a little bit of free climbing, and did some really great free falling. Well, not so great free falling. Nothing even in the brink of the kinds of things that you've done. I mean, as I said, you've climbed Everest and you've climbed mountains on every continent, I think you said, right?
I'm missing Antarctica.
You're missing Antarctica.
Which is a shame, but it's really expensive.
It's also really freaking cold. But, they're all cold, I guess, right? So, when I was a kid, I remember I don't know if I remember it happening because I think I might have been too young, but I remember the name being thrown around, which was Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to climb Everest. This was the tallest mountain in the world, and how does it feel to be a climber who goes up the mountain that was, it's kind of like Roger Bannister with a 4-minute mile, to do something that everybody had said was impossible. Tell us about that first, because that for me was fascinating.
Well, this is where I don't say what I'm expected to say at all, because Everest is just a very large lump of rock and snow. I mean, it's an interesting one, and it is the highest on the planet, which gives it a certain flair, a certain attraction. But it's just a mountain. The importance we give to it is a very human level of importance, the way we chase the biggest thing we can find and then want to see whether we can overcome it or conquer it or whatever we're going to call it. Although, frankly, the mountain just stands there unmoved by our so-called conquering, and it'll still be standing there in 100,000 years' time, and who knows what will have happened to us as the human species by then. So what I'm trying to say is that I think the real core of a challenge like Everest is not its size or its reputation. It's what you gain by the process of trying something that wild, difficult, uncertain, unknown. Because we do live in kind of urban environments where I think we feel things are very much under our control.
Yes.
It's probably a fallacy, but nevertheless, we do feel that way. We built it, we run it, we manage it, and, it's ours.
Mm-hmm.
When you get out into the true wilderness, and there's a lot of wilderness out there still,
Of course.
and you begin to realize, you don't fully know this environment. There is no way of ever having enough information. We just cannot predict weather in enough detail. We don't know what's coming. We don't really understand how those levels of snow have built up over days and months and years and what dangers are hidden inside them. And then you start to realize how small you are, how each step only moves you 20 centimeters forward, and then how easily people die, how easily we get injured, damaged, crushed, killed. That's what the Everest journey is about.
Yeah.
So putting ourselves in a place out of our control and then seeing whether we can still fulfill our aims in that environment.
But I think you said something that's really poignant, and that is that we live in, one of the basic human needs is the need for certainty. So we want to control things, we want to keep things the same. But we also have this basic human need for uncertainty or adventure or the other thing. And some people are run by dominantly one or dominantly other, but ultimately we must face both. And, the climbing, you do everything you can to be certain. You take the right gear, you have the right team, but there's, hey, it's a beautiful day, it's going to be fabulous, and then suddenly the weather turns on you. That for me is a great metaphor for business, for leadership, because everything can look fantastic. It can all look like completely scalable and you got it all in control, and then suddenly the winds of change come. And the greatest example of that was 2008 and the collapse. Because how many companies, how many leaders were leading companies to the summit of the Fortune 500, getting to the top, and then suddenly were gone. We saw car companies that had been around for almost 100 years. We saw other companies that had been around for more than 100 years simply wiped off the face of the planet in a weather storm of financials. So for me, it's a very cool metaphor to see how do you prep? Because that's the question, right? Because you're going into these things, you can't have control of everything. What's the advice you would give to somebody who's a leader scaling the success mountain, the leadership mountain, about prep?
Oh, I think there are a whole set of really interesting ideas you can dive into here. So we're not going to go anywhere near fitness equipment permits. That's entry level. That's you just being good enough to play in your space,
right.
Whether your space is mountaineering or your industry. The things that are really going to make a difference are much more kind of esoteric than that.
Yes.
So picking up on your 2008 example, incredibly important. Why are you doing it? 2008 was the business example or the business equivalent of what climbers call summit fever. When you're so busy chasing short-term glory, goal, profit gain, that you completely lose sight of your bigger picture. Because when you go out onto a mountain, any mountain, there are two goals. One is getting to your summit, whatever your summit may be. Your other one is coming home alive, which is quite important. And the idea, I guess some people think it's worth losing their lives for, but most of us are trying to navigate our way through the risk in a form that will bring us home.
Right.
And what you need is that those two goals remain aligned.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they're aligned, they're fine. And you get to the summit, you go down the other side, you go home. That's perfect. The danger is when those two goals start to drift.
Mm-hmm.
There's an opening gap between the two. You're putting in so much more effort into reaching that summit than you anticipated that you're eating through the reserves that will get you back down again.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a marathon. There's no sitting down and calling a taxi on your cell phone.
Oh, come on.
You've got to have reserves.
You mean there's no Uber on Everest?
I think at some point the helicopters will be all the way up Everest. But, for the moment, let's say you've still got to walk yourself back down again. And people lose sight of that opening gap because they're so invested in the summit. That's the goal that feels glorious. Mm-hmm. That's the goal that's going to make a really good line at dinner parties and you're going to stick on your CV. And people lose sight that the gap is opening between the two. And if you don't notice that gap opening and you don't jump to pick the right one of the two goals when you have to choose between them, that's when you're likely to get in serious trouble. And businesses do this. Our modern world that insists on quarter over quarter, 10% growth endlessly, it's just not possible.
Right.
And companies lose sight of the fact that they have long-term goals. And that may be just staying in business. Right. That may be keeping their employees in jobs. That may be continuing to serve their industry with honesty and integrity. A lot of that was lost in 2008 as everyone rushed for the chance to just be seen to make huge amounts of profit. And the damage that was done, not just to the companies, but the employees, to everyone who had pensions tied up in any of the pension funds that were tied up in the stock of the companies. The damage was catastrophic. And I think our current political state comes out of 2008.
No doubt about it.
The damage is long term.
How do you assess that gap? As a leader at that point, and we want to guide our viewers, our listeners to this because you're right. I mean, I think that one of the things that I say from the stage is that leaders are achievers. So there's an achievement mentality in order to get to a leader position. But if you become driven by the achievement, then you stop being a leader. So you need to achieve in order to lead. But if you're only driven by achieving, then you stop leading. It becomes all about you and your own glory. So how do you help leaders make that assessment in that gap you just talked about?
All right, let me give you two different ideas. So the first one is being very clear about what you're actually doing. Mm-hmm. There's a reason I wrote a book which I called Just for the Love of It, because I was so tired of, sorry about this, but mostly men, writing books called Killer Mountain and The Death Zone. It's like, oh, yeah. We came, we saw, we conquered. And like, yeah. I do it because it's fun. It's joyful, it's inspiring, it's enriching, and I learn a huge amount about myself and about interacting with people by doing these things. So when I go onto a mountain, yes, I'm keen on the summit.
Of course.
I'm ambitious, but I'm actually there for the experience, for the journey. So if we don't reach the summit, yeah, it's not as good as it could have been, but it's not just a failure.
No.
Everything we did to get there, everything we learned by trying, everything we learned by deciding when to turn back and extricating ourselves safely. There's value, knowledge, interest in all of that. So I think a lot of leaders need to be quite clear about what they're really trying to achieve, which is why I'm not convinced about short-term turnaround experts, because they tend to be trying to achieve 3 or 4 years worth of embellishing their own reputation. I'm not sure that that's necessarily good for the longer-term interests of the company. So I think you've got to say, this company that I'm leading, what are they about? What do they stand for?
Mm-hmm.
And that can't just be about how much money you brought in this month. It's got to be about what you're contributing to your shareholders, your employees, your society, your industry sector, and how long you want your company to continue making that contribution. What kind of reputation you want to have as you make that reputation.
I think what you're saying there is for me is vital. It's the core of what we speak about, which is knowing the company purpose and living by that purpose. And for me, that's deeper than even what Simon Sinek has explained as the why. It's actually the soul of something. It's the what we call the why of the whys, the deeper part that I can live with joyously no matter what happens. And I do think that many leaders lose sight of that because we are under enormous pressure to outperform ourselves, time after time after time. And we all know you're only as good as your last gig. You're only as good as your last quarter. You're only as good as whatever it might be in the way that the world has set us up to see success. But I think that what you're pointing out here is vitally important, and that is how do you assess the success? Because I think that it's now part of the modern sort of lexicon or phraseology of saying, well, it was a learning experience. But I think that a lot of stuff is just cliche shit that nobody actually believes, but they say it to pacify themselves from feeling like crap, as opposed to actually meaning it. And for somebody like you who's done the things that you've done in climbing that you've come, for me, it's like, that's why it's a great example, because if you don't do that in the way that you're talking about, you're potentially dead next time. If you don't actually get that it's as important to learn as it is to scale or to summit, if you don't get that, you're dead in the water or dead in the mountain or dead, period, as a business. Are we agreed on this?
Absolutely. But I also think it's about really understanding why you want to do this. Mm-hmm. I've seen people on mountains like Everest, and they get halfway up and it's not particularly glamorous. It's hard work, and you spend half the time going back down again, and the weather's terrible and it's boring, and they just, and then, something goes wrong and somebody dies and everybody's desperately shocked, and you go like, why are you here? If you don't enjoy the process and you hadn't taken on board the level of risk, what did you think you were doing? And I think what's really interesting is what's happened to Everest. Right now, Everest is the 21st century, rich man's midlife crisis. In the 20th century, you went out and you bought yourself a Porsche. The 1980s,
so now it's no
1990s,
longer a Porsche and a ponytail. It's an Everest expedition?
It's an Everest expedition.
Oh my God, really? I never knew that.
It's a paid conquering of Everest. But dig into this. It's really interesting. So nowadays, if you go in the spring season on the standard route, let me just say that there are other much more adventurous ways of being on Everest. But the standard deal is now costing you, I don't know, roughly $50,000. It's all the knowledge and skill has been outsourced. So you probably have Western guides making all the decisions about weather and this kind of thing. You have Sherpa guides carrying almost all your equipment. And you have a safety line that starts at base camp and runs all the way up to the summit. And you are probably one of close on 1,000 people and you get in queue. And you clip into the safety line with you've got a thing called a Juma, which is like a sliding handhold, and you get into the queue, and off you shuffle up Everest. And people want to come back.
Like a ride at Disneyland. Only death-defying, but it's a lineup at Disneyland to get to the summit, to get on the ride.
Oh, seriously, you just try Googling queues on Everest. It does look like
I know.
queuing
I have
for
friends
a
who
Disneyland ride.
did it, and they said that was the shocking thing for them, that they got to a place where there was literally a 4-hour lineup to get to the next little bit. Wow.
But what I want to do is dig into that, because what people are actually hoping is that they will be able to say that me and Edmund Hillary, I conquered Everest. I'm an adventurer. I'm out there doing truly, challenging stuff. But they also want it to be safe, convenient, fit into the amount of leave they can take, not actually be too desperately difficult, guaranteed outcomes. And you can't have both. And I think if you come back to business, so a lot of companies are busy claiming to be innovative and groundbreaking, and oh no, they're not. They're in the queue on Everest. They're claiming to be taking big risks to do something new, but they're not. They're actually doing the same old thing slightly differently. Yeah. They're in the queue wearing a red jacket instead of a yellow jacket. Mm-hmm. If you really want to be innovative, if you want to get onto things like a team I was on, where we did the first ascent of Nan-ga Par-bat via the Mazeno Ridge, there you go in with a massive chance of failure. Mm-hmm. It's just not, if you aren't like 11 teams have tried, they'd all failed over 35 years. Now that's starting to try and do something innovative. And that's particularly where you're likely to get trapped. So I'm going to bring it back to this idea of your two goals separating. You go into something like that, you've got a plan, which is it's your best hope. It's all your research, everything you understand about your challenge. And then it's your best hope of what you really want to happen. But that doesn't mean it's your truth. No. When you get out there, circumstances change. What you find is not what you expect. The challenge as the leader is to keep everybody's eye on the summit while still being flexible about the route you take to get there. Mm-hmm. And that's hard because it can look indecisive. It would be much easier to be clipped into the line in the queue on Everest, because then you'd know which way you need to go.
Yeah.
But it's not groundbreaking.
What you were saying here again for me is right on. It's fabulous. Because leadership is risk. There's no doubt about that. But I think that when I have these conversations with the leaders that I work with, the ones that I mentor privately, or whether we work with teams and organizations, is we'll talk about innovation, and we say, okay, so what is innovation? And invariably nobody really seems to know what it is. And I say, a lot of what you're describing is a tweak. It's not an innovation. As you said, the analogy of a yellow jacket or a red jacket, and everybody's wearing yellow, so you wear red. That's not innovation. That's a way to say I'm a bit different, but you're really not. And innovation requires risk. But again, not crazy risk, but you have to pay attention that there is risk. Because the other side of innovation, and I think that this is what people are pursuing, is glamour. The other side of the innovation is we created the iPod. I climbed Everest. But if you don't also calculate risk and understand that, and that is to me is the push-pull that you're talking about, is yes, I want the goal, I want to get to that place, but I also have to measure the risk. And the challenge psychologically is, how do I keep the risk in my mind real? Because there's some people, by their nature, will minimize the risk, and it's no big deal. It will be fine. It's no big deal. And on the other side, for other people, it's like, oh my God, we could die. Whether that's climbing a mountain or whether that's climbing a success mountain. So they never move either way. So one of them is doing stupid shit, and the other one never moves anywhere. So the stupid stuff, there's things that happen. You've got things like Steve Jobs, who conquers the world and does amazing things, but definitely fell off his mountain several times and got the shit kicked out of him. I think that we're all in our society, we're very focused, I've said this before, but we're very focused on the glamour of a thing. It's very glamorous to talk to Cathy O'Dowd, who has climbed all these mountains. But now go and talk to her while she's climbing them. Oh no, I ain't doing that. It's very glamorous to, you and I are speakers. It's very glamorous to see the speaker on the stage and say, oh, you get paid all that money to go speak on these stages. You get to travel the world. It's very glamorous. Yeah, you know what? I do love it, and it is kind of glamorous as I stand and get the round of applause, but everything that leads up to it ain't so glamorous. Standing in the airport while they're patting you down over and over and over again, sleeping in beds that are not your own, arriving jet-lagged, etc., and the 20, 30 years of prep, not so glamorous. How do we get that across, Cathy? Help us out. How do we get that across? How would you get that across? If I say, okay, I've done some mountain climbing, but I want to take it to that next. I want to say, how do you get them to grasp stepping away from the glamour? I know you said come back to what is your why, why you're really doing it, but how do you get them to make the true assessment of risk and glamour?
I think you need to. I don't know quite how to put this. You need to improve the company you keep, because the best way of understanding what's been done by people who are really innovative is to get to know them and to work with them. So if you want to be Steve Jobs with the iPod, what you can't be doing is producing iPod version 2, or in our case version 200 at this point.
Right.
If you want to be the equivalent of Hillary on Everest, you can't go and climb Everest in 2017. You've got to try and climb a new route and an 8,000 meter peak, and it'll be much more technically difficult than what Hillary did, but that's because it's now 65 years later.
Right.
And the standards have risen. So if you want to understand, I think, where the true cutting edge is, you've got to get out there and associate with the people who are doing it. Because we're sold a lot of fluff in the media. Let's go anywhere near fake news, but let's just settle for a lot of so-called stuff which is presented as being terribly impressive. A friend of mine calls it pink helmets on Everest. The first people to climb Everest wearing pink helmets. And that'll make
That's coming. That's coming.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's been done already. Whereas, and sometimes the people who are doing truly innovative stuff, it's so complicated, it doesn't actually make easy media copy. So if you're just watching from the outside, you may not be anywhere close to where true innovation is happening.
That's very good.
You need to get into the community and start to work with and seek out those people and start to understand. So as a climber, you don't do that by just phoning up a commercial guide and saying, I want to climb an 8,000 meter peak. You do that by building up the skill set yourself until you can climb without guides, and then by hanging out in places like where I am right now, or the other mountain places of the world, meeting people, climbing with them, making contact, building your way up from one mountain to the next until you're kind of good enough to be hanging with the people who are doing the really interesting things.
So how do you source that? I'm thinking about from a place of innovation, but it could be, how do you source finding those people? Because we tend to find out about innovative people after they've innovated, and then they become inaccessible. If you wanted to meet the guy who is, I've forgotten his name now, it's gone out of my head, but let's say the CEO of Airbnb or Uber, which were both innovation. I know that they use as examples to death now, but, they were very innovative at the time. Now those guys are such superstars, they're inaccessible. How do you source out somebody who's really innovative before they become so inaccessible, so famous, like, oh yeah, you can't get a meet with that guy?
I suspect the answer to that is to go with the next generation are, which certainly at the moment tend to be in various of the startup accelerators.
Right.
Because of course, again, it's terribly difficult to model your own career on sort of one individual superstar. You may have a huge crush on the likes of the Uber guys or Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or whoever it was, but
Sure.
a lot of those careers are just astonishing individual talent combined with lightning strokes of luck that they then worked with great sort of effort and talent. It can be a little difficult to try and re-engineer that for yourself. You need to find your own path. And I think just as I would go to hang in the places where these people are actively engaged, like Chamonix,
Right.
I think the place to find innovation right now is to get involved with startup accelerators, with angel funding, with everything that's involved in with the next generation. You want to find the Facebook boys when you still have a chance to find the project at the beginning, rather than try and get to them now.
Yeah. We used the example earlier of 2008, 2009 financial crash, and for me that is a good analogy of a storm, because it was a storm. In '96, you talked about the fact that you were trapped in a killer storm, one that was described in the bestseller book in Into Thin Air. Walk us around that in the metaphor of leadership.
Yes, I think what's really interesting about storms, or the sort of things that people think of as the great risks of mountaineering, avalanches, blizzards, is they are rarer than you think.
Oh.
In fact, the vast majority of teams fail for reasons that are internal to the team or internal to the individual. So the first thing that's worth remembering is, although it's the storms, the avalanches that get books and movies and that kind of thing, 99% of the failure is actually just teams crumbling in the face of the challenge. And therefore, as a leader, the majority of your effort should be going into the day-to-day small grinding problems that are making your team less effective, less motivated, more demoralized, more conflict-ridden than they should be. And it can be hard to deal with because it's the so-called dreaded soft skills, it's the emotional stuff, it's hard to put it on a spreadsheet, and human emotions are just messy, they can be difficult to try and jolly people up to kind of do their best, but actually you're going to get more results there by getting your team to be just that much more efficient than you are spending your time avoiding huge risks that will probably never happen. But then I think the next thing that's interesting is that even when the big things happen, it's relatively rare that it is a literal, just a tsunami of bad luck.
Right.
Something where there is nothing you can do. You cannot run, you cannot hide, you can't take shelter. And there's nothing to be done about that.
No.
But in most cases, when teams are getting into trouble with storms or avalanche or whatever, they've made mistakes. Small ones that make them vulnerable.
Right.
And it's not that you mustn't make mistakes. That's just impossible. We're human. It's very, very hard to be perfect all the time. But it's well worth being aware that when we look at something like and go, oh, there's nothing we could do. I mean, there was a killer storm. It's like, well, actually, there's a good deal you can do. And a good many teams got out of that safely, and climbers got out of that safely. So those who didn't, what had actually gone wrong?
Right.
Why couldn't they access their safety procedures? Why didn't they have a sort of an exit strategy for those kind of circumstances? Why didn't they have the knowledge or the equipment or the mental or physical strength to get themselves out of it? I'm not saying it's about just point blame.
No.
I'm saying it's worth thinking about the fact that we've normally, when disaster hits, we're vulnerable because of some mistake, some weakness in our own teams.
It's very interesting to me because the work that we do is all around, quote, soft skills. and part of what we say around that is the hard skills might get you there, but the soft skills are what will keep you at the top. That's what's going to really make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the work that we do is in emotional intelligence and purpose-driven, authentic leadership, all those kinds of things. And I think that is so underestimated in climbing Success Mountain and climbing anything. I mean, for me, the great example is before I fell, I had no fear of heights. I did all kinds of not smart, stupid things at ridiculous heights with no safety, no sense of risk. I was good as gold. Now I stand on a chair and I get wobbly knees. I'm a master trainer for NLP. So somebody said, well, couldn't you cure that phobia? I go, absolutely I could. And they go, why don't you? It's a good caution for me right now. It's part of me understanding it's not a good idea. I watch a movie with somebody mountain climbing and I'm like, oh, I feel all wobbly. But it's that psychological piece. And I think that is so often underestimated because, and I don't just mean as in we focus on all the hard skills. That's fine. You did that. And you go, well, what about Bob? And we make these assumptions about people. And we go, well, Bob's rock solid. Yeah, is he? And there was a show. I never saw this season of the show, but I saw one episode of the show. The show was called Survivor when it first started. Mm-hmm. And I said to my wife, it was early on, and I said to my wife, this show is going to be massive. And she said, why do you think so? Because it seems like it's crap. And I said, it's going to be huge. And she said, why? I said, because it's bringing people to their base personality under the highest levels of stress. And and I see that in the boardrooms, I see that in business. This perfectly wonderful, nice person is now under the crushing pressure of the board and the financials and all the rest of it, has suddenly turned into a first-class asshole. I cannot help but imagine that even as somebody leading a team like yourself, somebody appears to be all that in a bag of chips, and then the storm hits or the line slips or something happens. How do you get people ready to see that darker side of their own personality? Not necessarily a bad side, but a side that they may have a really strong blind spot to. And I realize I'm probably asking questions you don't usually get asked.
Okay, I think I'd approach that from two sides. One would be to try not to have that guy on the team to start with.
Yeah, but you don't know, right? Because like I said, it looks great. Yeah. Everything seems fabulous.
Yeah, so you kind of put the effort you can at the beginning. Mm-hmm. When people say, interviewing really matters, bringing the right people on at the beginning, that's a huge time saver because if they turn out to be the wrong people, it's so complicated later on. Then on the mountain itself, now this might be too touchy-feely for your hardcore corporate executives, but I think it's really important that when you accept that you're going to put people under a great deal of stress, that you give them space to kind of express that stress before it becomes the crisis point.
Yeah.
Because if everybody is both stressed and there's a culture that says you must at all times look as if you're rock solid, completely in control, and just like an A-type hero, that's tough. And I mean, on Everest, it doesn't have to be the storm or slipping on the line, as you suggested. It can be the cup of coffee or the smell of the guy's socks next to you or the chap who snores in the middle of the night or, it can be remarkably trivial things.
Of course.
That trigger the fight when things get said that, really can't be taken back.
Right.
So I think as a leader, you should not have let any one of your team members get that close to an explosive crisis point.
So
again,
there has to be an
it's about
outlet for the stress.
Management.
So before it gets to that, there has to be a safety valve. That I think that's vitally important. I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of the people who are really driven to succeed feel like they've got to keep the face, that they've got to keep, and they've got to always look like they got their shit together. And then when they don't, it doesn't let off as a little bit of steam. It explodes because we are a society that tells leaders you've always got to have it together. And that's a huge mistake. So I really appreciate you letting us know, because this is, as you said, this is potentially life-threatening to not do this and certainly career-threatening in a executive position.
And let me say something else about keeping the face.
Yeah.
The face is very white, Western, and male. So if your culture says everyone's got to be keeping the face, it's even harder for anyone who's outside that core group. So it's like being a woman on a mountaineering expedition. It's changing now. But back when I first started, it's hard, particularly because as a woman, certainly my reaction to intense stress can be bursting into tears.
Sure.
And frankly, there's a lot to be said for it. It's a lot less damaging than picking a massive fight, potentially a physical fight.
Sure.
Because you're just uber stressed, but you've got your A-man game going. So it can feel very exclusionary to women or to people who come out of a non-sort of quite so Anglo-American driven success culture, to look at the face and go, I don't even know how to pull that face. I certainly don't know how to maintain it while trying to climb Everest at the same time.
It's frozen. That's why. It's frozen.
It's completely frozen. As a leader, you've got to be making a space that says everyone at some point will be cold, tired, bored, frustrated, scared. And scared will look different on different people, but everyone will be there.
Yeah.
And everyone has to be able to turn around to the rest of you and say, this is why you have the team. You look to other people and go, yeah, no, this is not my best day.
Right.
I'm battling to feel it right now. Remind me why we're doing this.
Right.
Distract me, make me laugh, put an arm around my shoulders, help me sort my kit, just something. Make me feel that I'm not on my own failing to cope with this environment.
I think that if leaders did that, just that alone, I mean, let's say, okay, we're working towards this, whatever the big goal is, right? This is what we're working towards. And in the process of that, let's say we've got the executive team around. In the process of that, everybody's going to feel scared at some point. Everybody's going to feel bored at some point. Everybody's going to feel frustrated at some point. Everybody's going to feel angry at some point. Everybody's going to feel joyous at some point. And we actually went around the team and said, okay, what does that look like on your face? What does that look like in your behavior? And actually got that vulnerability open. My goodness, because then it would be like, oh, okay, so guess what, Dove? We're on this journey, and I'm now bored out of my mind, and I would love to just jump ship right now. So I'm now, because that was out, and okay, so we asked you what it was, you told us what it was, and you also gave us a strategy. Okay, so how about you do this? Great. Okay, now I'm back on board. Like, what a phenomenal strategy right there to say everybody is going to feel these things, so let's own that and prepare for that. That for me, I think, is an awesome leadership strategy right there. Number one, bam, got it.
I think what's so interesting about using mountains as metaphors for this stuff is, for us, the risk is very real and very immediate. In business, the risks or the things can go wrong. It can only really come to light years later. So it's kind of a little harder to trace it back to its origins.
Yes.
In some ways, you've kind of got less skin in the game because the risk's so diffuse.
Yeah.
But coming back to this idea of you've got to let people be vulnerable. You've got to let people not have to be inhumanly achieving 24/7. On the mountain, these really big mountains, there's not much in the way of mountain rescue. It's pretty much the team.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody is becoming ill with altitude sickness or with other kinds of illness, or they're carrying an injury that's getting steadily worse, and they dare not admit it because, no sign of weakness, winners never quit, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, blah, 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 all this stuff. And so they don't admit something's going wrong, and then they collapse.
Right.
Now the whole team's in danger.
Yes.
Because there is no rescue. The whole team now has to give up on the objective and start trying to get somebody, maybe they can't walk.
Right.
The minute they can't walk, it's serious trouble.
Right.
Because you're trying to carry, 6 foot something, 100 kilos back down a mountainside.
Yeah.
You really want people to be able to put their hand up and say, if I go on, I'm not sure I can get back.
Right.
And that puts our whole team at risk. And potentially you may have to split the team. It's reasonably common that not everyone gets to the top.
Right.
You hope that everyone will, but you accept that some people may have to stand down and sit in support of the rest. But to make that work, people have got to feel that it's okay to admit to weakness. Because if we can solve your altitude sickness, if we can cure your injury, yes, absolutely, let's do that.
Right.
Get you back on board. It's a long-term game. We're not trying to summit tomorrow, we're probably trying to summit in 4 weeks' time.
Right.
But if people are hiding it because they feel that they have to be, macho every minute of the day, the whole project is undermined by that.
It's fabulous insight. Now leadership means, and it's sort of your point, leadership means making tough decisions. And in your book, you talk about the time in 1998 when you're climbing the north face of Everest and you were stopped a few hundred meters from the summit and you were trying to help this dying American climber. That is a moment of tough decision. Can you tell us about that? Because I think that this is profound.
Yes, it was it's probably the toughest thing I've ever had to do.
I'm sure.
Although in some ways, in its moment, the decisions, they were what they were. So to give the context very briefly, this is the north side of Everest. We're a team of 5. Our expedition is going really well. This is now our summit day. We leave a little bit late. We leave at 2 o'clock in the morning rather than midnight. And that means we're at the foot of something called the first step. It's before dawn, but it's now light, just. That sort of grey early morning light. We're still in the shade because we're on the north side. And I see colour, and I look across and see what looks like it's a corpse, a body, which happens.
Sure.
There are people do get killed very high on Everest. It's not easy to get them back down again.
No.
So there are some bodies out there. Except that this one moved, and they don't normally move. So, not a body, it's a victim. I go over to have a look, and I didn't realize who it was immediately. We kind of worked it out later. But it's this American, Francis Arsenyev. So, they are climbing, her and her Russian husband. That's it. No team, no Sherpas, no radios, no oxygen. Trying to be the first American woman to climb Everest without oxygen. And that's the kind of challenge that if you get it right, makes you world class. And if you get it wrong, it will kill you. Right. So they'd kind of got it wrong in the sense they'd been up there for several days already waiting for the weather to improve. They'd then gone for the summit. This was all kind of worked out afterwards. They took a very long time to get to the summit. They were seen by telescope from base camp by one of the other teams, although we didn't know this. And then on the way back down, she had nothing left. She'd done that thing of using all her reserves to get to the top, and she collapsed. Her husband left her to go for help, and he fell and was killed. Oh. We didn't know any of this. No. He vanished. His body was found several years later. So, Frances is still alive, but only just. She's probably been up there since he left her for a day and a half. And then they've been up well above 8,000 meters without oxygen for a number of days. And now you run into a very human problem, which is the assumption that, well, where there's life, there's hope. There must be something you can do. But it's a very city assumption, because what we normally mean is, well, I'll just phone 911, I'll phone the police or the ambulance or some experts who will take over. And if the person dies in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, well,
you did everything you could.
Yeah, exactly. Except in this case, there's no one to call.
No.
We're climbing. We have no extra facilities. We have no form of heat other than our own bodies. We have no spare oxygen other than what we're breathing. We have no extra masks other than the ones on our own faces. So we try and the hope is that maybe she can get up onto her feet. Because if we could walk her down, then there's potential. Mm-hmm. But she can't even sit up. She's as limp as a rag doll. She's speaking, but not in any coherent sense. She's saying just a couple of phrases over and over like a broken record. Mm-hmm. So there's no real thinking in there anymore. Her eyes can't focus on us. She's kind of aware that something's happened, but she's not in any real sense as to who we are. Or even, I think, at that point, potentially who she is. And the answer is she's going to die. We can't get her anywhere. With the resources we have in the time she has left, that will make any difference. And this is hard. Humans, we don't like this.
No.
We like believing that we can talk our way, work our way out of anything, that there's always one more solution, an idea, something, think laterally, outside the box, etc., etc. I don't know. Not always. But what is particularly devastating about this was then you have to say, well, we can't save her, but, are we going to leave her?
Right.
That feels brutal.
Mm-hmm.
But minus 30, the wind's up, in the shade. Staying with her means we get hypothermic.
Right.
I was already as cold as I have ever been. This weird sensation of I sort of... And I felt grey. Just cold. My body was going. And just, if we sit with her, we're not going to stand up again. And that's a truth that is horrible. But it is what it is. You can, but it doesn't change the truth of it. So we went down. Because what I couldn't do was just step past her and refocus on climbing.
No.
As I said at the beginning of this, I do climb for the joy of it, for the fascination of the challenge, the joy of the experience. And, at that moment in time, there was no joy left.
So what is the lesson for our viewers and our listeners in what you've just explained in that experience, which is heart-wrenching?
I think the only real lesson I can take away from that is that sometimes you kind of done everything right, you're being the best you can be, and it still doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes things will go profoundly wrong. You will get caught up in disasters and tragedies that were not of your own making. And life's like that. And sometimes you will get caught up in those disasters and other people will not understand and they will blame you for what happened. And life's like that. Mm-hmm. And all you can do is trust in your own choices and then pick yourself up and keep on going. Because life is a messy, complicated affair. And although we are come out of a culture that believes very much in sort of self-determination, it's only true up to a certain point.
Yeah.
We operate within a world of both people and nature that is far, far beyond our control or our full understanding. And all we can do is pick our best path through it with as much authenticity as we can manage.
Wow. Well, it has been phenomenal having you here. This has been not only incredibly insightful, but also incredibly inspiring. And I really want to thank you for being on the show today. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, about your books, about bringing you in to speak at a conference or an event or for their company.
So my home portal is my website, cathyo'dowd.com. The book is Just for the Love of It on my website or at Amazon near you. And my speaking takes me all the way around the world. I'm based out of Andorra, which is a postage stamp of a country in Western Europe. But I travel wherever I'm wanted.
Wonderful. So I hope you'll stay with us till the end, Cathy. I'm going to sign off to everybody else and say goodbye. But as I said, I hope you'll stay with us. And I want to thank you. And I'll come back and say thank you personally at the end. But I want to thank you, viewers, listeners, for tuning in. And, profound stuff here, really. I mean, I say at every show, don't just listen, please. Do something with what you heard. Take some notes, listen back, watch it back. I know we're distracted, we do other things. But certainly find out more about Cathy. Go to CathyO'Dowd.com, and I'll just spell that for you. CathyO'Dowd.com. And, of course, we will make sure that link is placed on all the outlets. But, get over there and have a look. Until next time, I want to say, if you are serious about having laser beam clarity about your purpose and about building a culture of high-performing, highly engaged leaders who are fiercely loyal, then reach out to me, Dov Barron, through fullmontyleadership.com. Because the hard skills will get you there, but it's the soft skills that will keep you at the top and make sure that when you get there, you're not there all alone. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in. Also, remember to stop by matrix.fullmontyleadership.com and you can get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. You can plug that in and find out where you really stand in the 5 categories of authentic leadership. Until next time, this is Dov Barron, Full Monty Leadership, saying, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about why you're really climbing Success Mountain. Till next time, this is Dov Barron, and I am out.